ecological horror, the forest that tends itself, and weeds humanity. Hello and welcome back to the Wilderness Protocol. We are an archive, a collection of stories from the shadowed corners of the map, testimonials from those who have walked the unmarked trails and lived to tell the tale. We traffic in the unsettling, the unexplained, the rules you must follow when you discover that the laws of nature are not what you were taught. They tell you to stay on the path. They tell you to pack out what you pack in. They tell you not to feed the animals. Sound advice for a world we think we understand. But what happens when you stumble into a place where you are not the apex predator? Where you are not even considered an animal? What happens when you realize the rustling in the leaves is not a bear or a wolf but the groundskeeper, and you are the pest it has come to remove? Tonight, we delve into the declassified files concerning National Park Designation 734, known colloquially as the Verdant Preserve. It is a place of almost aggressive beauty, a pocket of the world untouched by the usual blights of man. The trees grow a little taller, the flowers bloom a little brighter, and the air feels cleaner. Too clean. For decades, it has also been a place of quiet, persistent disappearances. Hikers who vanish without a trace. Campers whose tents are found zipped up and empty. The official explanation is always the same: user error, animal attacks, exposure to the elements. But the whispers among the rangers, the hushed entries in forgotten journals, they tell a different story. They speak of a presence in the woods. They speak of a feeling of being watched, not with malice, but with consideration. The kind of look a gardener gives a weed before they pull it from the soil. This is the story of Designation 734, a story that asks a terrifying question. What if the most pristine wilderness on Earth is not wild at all? What if it is a meticulously kept garden? And what if the creature that tends it has finally decided that humanity has overstayed its welcome? This is the protocol for the gardener. Our first case study is a woman named Amelia Hayes. And to understand the strangeness of her disappearance, you must first understand the meticulous nature of the woman herself. Amelia was not a thrill-seeker. She was not a reckless youth testing her limits. She was a 48-year-old librarian from Portland, a woman who found a quiet, profound solace in order. Her life was a collection of well-kept systems. Her books were cataloged not just by author, but by publication date. Her spice rack was alphabetized. Her hiking gear, her passion, was maintained with the precision of a surgeon. To her, the wilderness was not a place of chaos to be conquered, but a grander, more complex system to be appreciated. She understood its rules. You carry a map and compass even with a GPS. You tell people your exact route and your expected return time. You respect the weather. You measure your food, your water, your energy. Amelia Hayes did not make mistakes. On May 11, 2008, a Wednesday, she drove her sensible, well-maintained sedan to the Sycamore Creek trailhead in the southern portion of the Verdant Preserve. She placed her permit, clearly marked for a 3-day, 2-night solo trip, on her dashboard. She was planning to hike a popular 10-mile loop, a trail she had completed twice before. It was a comfortable challenge, a familiar friend. For 3 days, the world continued as normal. But on Saturday, May 14th, her car was still sitting in the parking lot. A ranger, making his rounds, noticed it. He checked the permit. She was 24 hours overdue. This alone was not a major cause for alarm. A twisted ankle, a desire for one more night under the stars, these things happen. By Sunday morning, however, when the car remained, the first tremors of concern began. By Sunday afternoon, Amelia Hayes was officially declared a missing person. The search and rescue operation that spun into motion was, by all accounts, textbook. Professional. Thorough. Frank Carter, the SAR lead at the time now a grizzled, Retired man living in Montana would later describe it as one of the most extensive searches of his career. They brought in teams from 3 counties. They established a command post, grids were drawn over maps, and teams of 4 were sent methodically into the green expanse. The problem began almost immediately. The dogs, veterans of 100 grim searches, were a special kind of useless here. They would whine, their hackles raised, tracing frantic, nonsensical circles before sitting abruptly, looking up at their handlers with an almost apologetic confusion. They could smell the trail of Amelia Hayes leading to a certain point on the path about 2 miles in, and then nothing. The scent didn't fade. It stopped. It stopped as if she had been plucked vertically from the world. For 10 days they searched. Helicopters with state-of-the-art thermal imaging flew overhead, but the canopy of the verdant preserve was unusually thick, a dense green blanket that seemed to absorb the technology's gaze, showing nothing but a cool, uniform sea of leaves. The teams on the ground scoured every inch of the Sycamore Creek Trail. They found no sign of a fall, no broken branches, no scuff marks on the rocks. They began to search off-trail, a demoralizing task in a forest that dense. They yelled her name until their throats were raw, but the sound seemed to die in the air, swallowed by the moss-covered trunks of the ancient trees. Frank Carter, in a taped interview for a local historian in 2015, a recording we have acquired, described the atmosphere of that search. His voice, even years later, is heavy with the memory. You have to understand, a search like that has a sound. It's a racket. People shouting, radio squawking, dogs barking. You're trying to impose human noise on a big, quiet place. But in 734, the quiet pushes back. The moment you'd stop for a water break, the moment the radios went silent, it was like being at the bottom of the ocean. No birds. I mean, none. You might see one, flitting way up in the canopy, but you never heard them. No squirrels yelling at you for getting too close to their stash. No rustle of a deer running off. Just your own breathing, and the blood pumping in your ears. Felt expectant, like the whole forest was holding its breath, waiting for you to leave. On the 4th day, they found her campsite. The discovery did not bring relief. It brought a deep, penetrating unease that settled over the entire search party. A rookie named Evans found it, about a mile off-trail in a small, flat clearing. The location was odd for Amelia. She was a stickler for the rules, and off-trail camping was discouraged. But that was the least strange thing about the scene. Her tent, a high-quality, muted green model, was pitched perfectly. The guy lines were taut, the stakes driven firmly into the ground. Inside, her sleeping bag was neatly rolled and cinched, placed at the head of her sleeping pad. On top of the sleeping bag sat a paperback copy of Leaves of Grass by Walt Whitman, open to the middle. Holding the pages open was a smooth, gray river stone, the kind you'd spend time looking for, a perfect weight, a perfect shape. Outside the tent, her small cooking stove was assembled. Her pot was clean, sitting beside it. Her food bag, containing enough rations for another day, was hung perfectly from a high branch, a masterclass in bear-proofing. Her hiking poles were collapsed and strapped to the side of her pack. Her water filter was laid out on a small, clean cloth, clearly having been recently used. Her boots were placed neatly by the tent's entrance. Everything was in its place. Everything except Amelia Hayes. The scene radiated a sense of peaceful, mundane order. It looked as if she had woken up, made breakfast, read a little poetry while the water boiled, and had then simply stepped out of existence. But then there was the detail that made the hair on the back of Frank Carter's neck stand up. The detail that was never included in any official report. The ground. In a perfect circle extending approximately 20 feet out from the center of her tent, the forest floor was utterly barren. Not a single fallen leaf, not a twig, not a pine needle. Not a loose stone. It was just dark, rich, bare earth. The line where the natural clutter of the forest met this sterile circle was sharp, as if drawn by a compass. It looked, as Carter would later say, like someone had taken a giant's broom and swept the place clean. The men and women of the search party stood at the edge of that impossible circle, staring. They were practical people, accustomed to the grim and messy realities of the wild. They had seen it all, but they had never seen anything like this. It was orderly, but it was the order of an alien mind. It was a violation. They took their photographs, they bagged the evidence, but they did not speak of the circle. How could you write that down on a government form? Encountered area of preternatural tidiness? They would have been sent for psychological evaluation. The search for Amelia Hayes was eventually called off. The official report filed it as presumed deceased, cause unknown, with the addendum that a disorienting event was the most likely culprit. But the men who were there, who stood at the edge of that silent, swept circle, knew that whatever happened to Amelia Hayes was not a simple accident. She hadn't gotten lost in the woods. The woods had tidied her away. 2 years passed. The story of Amelia Hayes faded into the unfortunate but accepted statistics of wilderness disappearances. Designation 734 remained a jewel of the park system, its breathtaking beauty untarnished by the whispers of strangeness. Then, in the late summer of 2010, the park took 2 more. Ben Carter and Lily Chun were everything Amelia Hayes was not. They were young, in their early 20s, filled with the casual invincibility of their age. They were in love. Their trip to the Verdant Preserve was a romantic getaway, a chance to capture beautiful images for their burgeoning social media presence. Where Amelia had been a quiet devotee of the wilderness, Ben and Lily were enthusiastic tourists. Their gear was brand new. Their knowledge of the terrain derived from a handful of blog posts. Their last contact with the outside world was a digital one. On the evening of their second day, Lily uploaded a photograph to her Instagram account. The image became famous in the weeks that followed, plastered across news channels and online forums. It shows Lily, her face a mixture of awe and a slight, photogenic apprehension, standing before a truly colossal oak tree. It is a tree that seems impossible. Its trunk is gnarled and thick, easily 20 feet in diameter, and it's covered in a blanket of the most extraordinarily vibrant green moss, a shade of emerald so intense it almost glows. The branches above her twist into the sky like the arms of a forgotten god. The caption Lily wrote beneath it was tragically prescient. It read, "The trees here feel ancient, like they're watching us. Having the most amazing time with at Ben Carter Adventures. Verdant Preserve lost in the woods notorious watching." The post garnered 142 likes. Then silence. When they failed to check out of their hotel and return to work, their families raised the alarm. The search that followed was loud and public, fueled by the primal fear of distraught parents and the insatiable appetite of the 24-hour news cycle. The park was once again filled with search teams, but this time they were accompanied by news vans and reporters. The primary clue was Lily's photograph. The oak tree was unique, a landmark so immense it should have been on every map, a point of interest for generations of hikers. An army of experts, from botanists to forestry officials, analyzed the image. They studied the lighting, the species of ferns at its base, the specific formation of its branches. They were certain they could pinpoint its location. They never found it. For 3 weeks they searched for the giant oak. They used satellite imagery, cross-referencing it with the photo. They sent rangers to every known ancient grove in the park. The tree from Lily Chen's final photograph, the most distinct and monumental landmark imaginable, did not seem to exist within the borders of Designation 734. It was as if it had posed for a single photograph and then vanished, taking the young couple with it. Their campsite was eventually discovered. It was a scene eerily reminiscent of Amelia Hayes's. The tent was zipped. Their phones and wallets were inside. A half-eaten meal of trail mix sat in an open bag between their sleeping bags. But this time, there was no unnaturally clean circle. There was something else. Or rather, a lack of something else. The area around their tent was devoid of the vibrant, glowing moss from Lily's picture. In fact, the entire sector seemed unusually dull, the colors of the forest muted, as if a saturation slider had been turned down. The official search yielded nothing more. But the unofficial one, the one conducted by volunteers and believers in the strange, continued. And it was during this phase that another piece of the puzzle slotted into place. A young volunteer, a college student named Sarah Jenkins, was searching a remote stretch of the park, near where the couple was believed to have disappeared. She reported her experience to the county sheriff, who politely noted it and dismissed it as the product of exhaustion and stress. Her written statement, however, is part of the file. She describes leaving the main trail, following a dry creek bed, when she felt a pull. A sense of curiosity directed towards a ridge to her left. She climbed it. On the other side was a small, secluded meadow she had never seen on any map. It was unnaturally green, bathed in a strange, silent light. And in the center of the meadow she saw them. Two figures. For a heart-stopping moment, she thought she had found Ben and Lily. She was about to scream their names to radio for help, when she froze. They weren't moving, and they weren't people. She described them as statues, roughly human-sized and shaped, but twisted, as if formed from wood that had grown in torment. And they were covered, completely coated, in the same impossible, vibrant green moss from Lily's photograph. They were positioned in a way that chilled her to the bone. They were kneeling, their forms bent forward, their faceless heads bowed towards the exact center of the meadow, as if in silent, eternal supplication. Her hands shook so violently she could barely operate her radio. She looked down for a second, fumbling with the buttons. In that brief moment, a thick, cold fog rolled into the meadow with unnatural speed, blanketing everything in a disorienting white. It was dense and immediate. Panicked, she waited for it to pass. When it cleared, no more than 2 minutes later, the meadow was empty. There were no wooden statues. There was no glowing moss. There were no footprints in the damp grass but her own. The meadow itself seemed ordinary now. Just another patch of green in a forest full of them. Sarah Jenkins's story was buried. But the patterns were now undeniable, at least to those few who had seen the pieces. An unnatural cleanliness. Flora that could appear and disappear at will. Statues made of wood and moss, kneeling in worship. And above all, a profound, watchful silence. The authorities had files full of missing people. But what they were slowly, unknowingly compiling was something else entirely. It was a list of ingredients, plucked one by one from the world, for a purpose they could not yet begin to imagine. The vanishings were not the story. They were just the preface. Dr. Eris Thorne was a man in love with the slow, silent world of botany. To his colleagues at the university, he was a quiet titan, a man whose papers on xylem function and fungal symbiosis were dense, brilliant, and utterly devoid of hyperbole. He was not a man given to flights of fancy. He was a creature of facts, of peer review, of the patient, incremental accumulation of knowledge. When he secured a multi-year research grant to conduct a comprehensive botanical survey of designation 734, it was seen as a perfect match. The park was famous for its unique hypervitality, a term used to describe its unusually robust and pristine ecosystem. Thorne was the perfect man to catalog it. He arrived in the spring of 2018, setting up a small, solar-powered research cabin on the park's periphery. His initial field notes, which were later recovered from that cabin and form the backbone of this file, read like love letters to the natural world. They are filled with a pure, scientific joy. He writes of discovering fern groves where the fronds of the Polystichum munitum, the common sword fern, grew to the size of a man's leg, their fractal patterns impossibly perfect. He documents carpets of moss that shimmered with an iridescent quality, shifting from emerald to gold depending on the angle of the light, a property he attributed to a unique cellular structure he had never before encountered. In his first 6 months, he formally identified 3 new species of native orchid, one of which, the Calypso arachnoides, had a petal formation that perfectly mimicked a species of spider that wasn't native to the region. An entry from his journal, dated July 12, 2018, captures this initial sense of wonder. The biomass here is simply astonishing. The rate of growth, the sheer health of the flora, exceeds any baseline I have ever recorded. It's as if the soil is supercharged, the air scrubbed clean of pollutants, the very light filtered to a perfect photosynthetic wavelength. This park is not just an ecosystem. It is the idealized form of an ecosystem. It is what a forest dreams of being. I feel a sense of privilege walking these trails. It's like being allowed to wander through a master studio, to see the finished, perfect work of the greatest artist of all, nature itself. But Eris Thorne was too good a scientist to remain in a state of simple awe. An artist may create a masterpiece, but a scientist must understand the brushstrokes. And as he began to analyze the deeper patterns of the park, his wonder began to curdle into a profound, intellectual disquiet. The masterpiece he was observing showed signs of an invisible, intelligent hand. The turning point came in October. He was mapping the distribution of the western sword ferns in the park's northern quadrant, a mundane data-gathering task. He was feeding thousands of GPS coordinates from individual fern clusters into his mapping software. The expectation was a random, chaotic spattering, dictated by sunlight, water, and soil quality, the beautiful mess of natural proliferation. When the final image rendered on his screen, he stared at it, unblinking, for over an hour. The data did not show a random spattering. It showed a design, stretched across 12 square miles of dense, rugged forest. The fern clusters were arranged in a perfect, magnificent logarithmic spiral. A Fibonacci sequence, the same divine proportion found in the seeds of a sunflower, the shell of a nautilus, the spiral of a galaxy. But here it was, written on a canvas of mountains and valleys. It was a pattern so vast, so mathematically perfect, it was completely invisible from the ground. It could only be seen from the God's eye view of pure data. His journal entry from that night is sharp, agitated. The lyrical wonder is gone, replaced by the frantic energy of a man whose entire worldview has been fractured. Entry, October 2nd, 2018. The ferns are a lie. Random chance cannot, will not, account for the distribution. I've run simulations all day. The probability of this pattern occurring naturally is less than the probability of my cabin spontaneously assembling itself from loose atoms. It is not natural. It is architecture. This is not a forest. It is a meticulously landscaped garden. The thought is absurd, but the data is undeniable. I have spent my life studying the language of nature. This is a different language. It is the language of mathematics, imposed upon a biological system with a will that is terrifying in its precision. Who is the architect? Who is the gardener? This discovery changed everything. Thorne abandoned his broader survey and began a frantic, obsessive search for more impossibilities, more signs of the architect. And he found them everywhere. He placed seismic and bioelectric sensors in the great aspen groves. Aspen trees, he knew, are often a single organism, a massive interconnected root system sending up thousands of individual trunks. His sensors revealed that the root system of the largest grove in designation 734 was pulsing with a slow, rhythmic bioelectric charge. It beat once every 28 seconds. A slow, steady, undeniable rhythm, like a single, colossal heart beating beneath the forest floor. He took core samples from the ancient redwoods, trees that had stood for over 1,000 years. When he cross-referenced the tree rings from specimens miles apart, on different elevations with different access to water, he found another impossibility. Their growth rings were identical. Not similar. Identical. They showed the exact same patterns of growth, stress, drought, and plenty year after year, for centuries. It was as if every tree in the park, regardless of its individual circumstances, was experiencing the exact same life, dictated by a single central consciousness. And then he turned his attention to the silence. The profound, unnatural quiet that the search and rescue teams had noted years before. Dr. Thorne quantified it. He set up a network of sensitive audio recorders throughout the park's core. The results were chilling. A typical, healthy, temperate forest is a cacophony of life. It hums and buzzes with millions of insects. It chirps and sings with hundreds of species of birds. It rustles and snaps with the movements of mammals. The soundscape of the verdant preserve, by contrast, was a dead zone. The biodiversity of airborne and ground-dwelling insects was 80% lower than in the bordering national forests. The bird population was almost non-existent. He recorded the calls of fewer than a dozen species in the deep woods, compared to the hundreds he should have found. The mammals were there: deer, bears, mountain lions, but their behavior was bizarre. His trail cameras showed them staying almost exclusively to the park's outer edges, a thin boundary zone. They would approach the deep, pristine core, and then stop, as if at an invisible fence, before turning back with visible agitation. The heart of the forest was an empty, silent, sterile cathedral. Thorne realized what he was seeing. It was a form of curation. The gardener, this immense, unseen intelligence, was not just encouraging certain plants to grow. It was actively discouraging or weeding out other forms of life. The noisy, chaotic, unpredictable elements, the insects, the birds, the mammals, were being kept out. It was cultivating a specific aesthetic. An aesthetic of silent, green, orderly growth. His final journal entry is the keystone of this entire file. It explains everything. It was written in a shaky, hurried hand on the evening of March 12, 2019. It is the last communication the world would ever receive from Dr. Eris Thorne. I have a theory. I know how it sounds. I know it is a theory that dismantles 2 centuries of biological science, but the data does not permit any other conclusion. This is not a forest. It is an organ. It is the visible biological expression of a vast planetary intelligence. The impossible growth, the geometric patterns, the synchronized heart of the aspens, the sterile silence, it is all part of a single coordinated system. A system that is being actively, intelligently managed. I have been calling it the gardener. A force that prunes, that weeds, that cultivates this place for a purpose I cannot begin to fathom. For weeks I have felt watched. It is not the feeling of a predator in the brush. I have felt that before. This is different. It is a feeling of being considered, observed. The way the leaves of the ferns seem to turn in unison to follow me as I walk. The way the branches of the willows seem to bend down, their tips brushing my audio equipment, as if to listen. Today I saw it, or a part of it, the part it was willing to show me. I was taking a soil sample near the base of the western cliff face, a routine task. Suddenly the ground began to tremble. Not an earthquake's violent shake, but a slow, deep, rhythmic vibration, coming from beneath my feet. And then, from the earth itself, a form began to emerge. It did not dig its way out. It assembled. Soil and tangled roots and moss, and veins of white fungus, all weaving themselves together, rising into a shape. It was immense, easily 40 feet tall, a bipedal form that was more suggestion than solid object, constantly shifting, its silhouette blurring at the edges. It had no face, no eyes, no features at all, but I felt its attention on me as one feels the heat of the sun. It was an absolute, crushing weight of pure focus. It held something in one of its massive, root-like hands. It was a deer, a young buck. The animal was not struggling, not fighting for its life. It was utterly placid, its eyes wide and calm, as if in a trance. The gardener knelt. The movement was slow, silent, and deliberate. It did not tear the deer apart. It did not eat it. With a tenderness that was more terrifying than any violence, it gently planted it. It pressed the deer's body into the soft earth at the base of the cliff. The soil and the roots of the forest floor flowed over the creature, like water, covering it completely until only a small mound remained. And then I witnessed a miracle, or a horror. From the top of that fresh mound of earth, a sapling began to sprout. It grew with an impossible, sickening speed. I could see the stalk thickening, the branches unfurling, the leaves opening to a sky that wasn't there. In less than a minute, it was a 10-foot tree, its leaves a shade of iridescent silver I have never seen in any textbook. The gardener was not a predator. It was composting. It was recycling an inferior life form, a noisy, transient animal, and transforming it into a superior one. A silent, beautiful, permanent plant. It stood to its full, towering height. And then, it turned its faceless head towards me, still standing there, frozen, my trowel still in my hand. It had seen me, knew I was here, and in that moment of absolute, silent, cosmic indifference, I understood. It was assessing me, considering my place in its garden. And I could only think of one question, the question that is now the only thing in my mind. What kind of plant would I be? Dr. Eris Thorne's research cabin was discovered by a park ranger 1 month later, during a routine check. His notes were compiled, his data meticulously organized on his laptop. Of the man himself, there was no trace. The official story is that he suffered a mental breakdown from isolation and wandered into the wilderness to his death. But his research, his data, his final, terrifying testament, was quietly classified by a shadowy branch of the Department of the Interior. It was filed away, buried under layers of bureaucracy. But it gave them a name for the anomaly. It gave them a framework for the horror. Dr. Thorne had provided the answer to the silent vanishings. The people weren't just lost. They were being weeded. And his work raised a far more terrifying question. If this is a garden, how big is it? And is it finished growing? Our first exhibit is not a scientific journal or a ranger's report. It is a piece of media, a ghost in the machine. It comes to us from the tragic final expedition of a group of 3 young filmmakers in the summer of 2021. They were what you might call modern-day explorers, armed not with compasses and canvas tents, but with 4K cameras, aerial drones, and a satellite uplink for live streaming. They called their YouTube channel Wild Pursuit, and their goal was to capture the raw, untamed beauty of the American wilderness. And, if they were lucky, something a little strange. The group consisted of Liam Donahue, the pragmatic leader and camera operator, Chloe Vance, the bright, charismatic on-screen host, and Mark Chun, the tech expert and drone pilot. Lured by the online whispers and folklore surrounding Designation 734's Silent Forest, they decided to break park rules and venture deep into the core for a multi-day, off-grid filming trip. They promised their small but loyal online following that they would solve the mystery of the quiet woods. For 3 days, their plan worked. Their live stream, though glitchy due to the terrain, broadcast stunning footage of the hypervibrant flora Thorne had documented. Chloe spoke in hushed, reverent tones about the beauty, but also about the unsettling lack of sound. Mark sent his drone soaring above the canopy, capturing breathtaking shots of the endless, uniform sea of green. They were documenting the garden, but they didn't yet know it. On the evening of the 3rd day, their stream abruptly cut to a static screen. Then, nothing. For weeks, they were simply another statistic, another group of missing persons swallowed by the verdant preserve. The official search found their abandoned vehicle, but nothing else. Then, nearly a month after they vanished, a miracle of modern technology occurred. One of their high-capacity memory cards, which was constantly syncing small data packets to a cloud server via their satellite link, transmitted one final, corrupted file. It was a fragment, a digital ghost, uploaded in the final moments before the device that held it was destroyed. Intelligence analysts at a branch of the government that does not officially exist worked for weeks to restore it. What they salvaged was 47 seconds of audio and 12 seconds of heavily distorted, almost unusable video. But it was enough. It was more than enough. I am going to play the audio transcript for you now. The voices you will hear are Liam and Chloe. They are whispering, their panic a raw, sharp edge against a strangely muted background. Liam, Chloe, get back. Get behind the rock. Get back now. Don't let it see you. Chloe, where's Mark? Liam, I can't see Mark. He was right there, he was just checking the drone. Liam, it has him. Oh God, Chloe, it has him. Just be quiet. Please just be quiet. Chloe, what is that thing? It's made of the forest? It's like the trees are moving. Liam, I don't know. It's oh my God, Chloe. It's not breaking him. It's not hurting him, it's weaving him. Say Chloe, weaving? What does that mean? What are you talking about? Liam, his arm, it's stretching. It's becoming a branch. The skin is it's like bark. Like white birch bark. Oh God, he's still looking at me. Mark is looking right at me. He's trying to scream, but flowers are coming out of his mouth. Little blue flowers, they're just spilling out. Say Chloe, what's that sound? That humming, it's in my head. Feels warm. It doesn't feel bad. Liam, it's the gardener, the story was real, Eris Thorne was right, it thinks it's making things beautiful. Don't listen, Chloe. Don't let it, don't. He's trying to scream, but flowers are coming out of his mouth. That sentence alone paints a picture of surrealist horror that no monster of fang and claw could ever hope to match. The 12 seconds of recovered video confirm Liam's horrifying description. It is a nightmare of corrupted data and fragmented images, a flickering glimpse into a process not meant for human eyes. The footage shows a small clearing. The colors are distorted, smeared with digital artifacts, but the forms are discernible. In the center stands a colossal figure, the gardener, just as Thorne described it. A vaguely humanoid silhouette made of shifting wood, moss, and tangled roots, light seeming to bend and warp around its edges. It holds the figure of the young man, Mark. He is not fighting. He is suspended, held gently in the gardener's root-like hands. And he is being remade. His left arm is visibly elongated, no longer flesh but a pale, smooth limb of white wood, sprouting small green leaves. His skin is mottled and peeling back, not to reveal blood and muscle, but a fibrous, bark-like texture underneath. His head is tilted back, his mouth open, and from it, a cascade of impossibly vibrant blue wildflowers is spilling forth, tumbling down his chest onto the forest floor. He is not being consumed. He is being turned into a grotesque piece of botanical art. a living sculpture. He is being weeded. This is the horror of the gardener's work. It is not the hot, quick violence of a predator. It is the cold, patient, creative cruelty of an artist with an alien aesthetic. An artist that sees our flesh not as life to be ended, but as raw material to be sculpted into something it deems more fitting for its grand design. The members of Wild Pursuit wanted to solve the mystery of the silent forest. Instead, they became a permanent, silent part of it. This act of weaving seems to be the primary method of disposal for those who are caught, those who actively intrude upon the gardener's sanctum. But what of the others? What of the bodies that are never found? What of the quiet vanishings, like Amelia Hayes? The gardener, as we've established, is resourceful. It wastes nothing. A second piece of evidence, discovered in early 2022, suggests a secondary purpose for its human weeds. A long-term cultivation. Ranger Jesse Holt was a 20-year veteran of the Park Service. He was a practical, no-nonsense man who had seen his share of strange things, but had always found a rational explanation. That changed on a cold morning in March. He was on a solo patrol along the park's western ridge, an area known for its dense pine forests, when he found a backpack. It was an older model, faded and weathered. What was strange was its position. It was not lying on the ground. It was embedded in the trunk of a large ponderosa pine, about 4 feet off the ground. The tree had grown around it. The nylon straps were fused with the bark. Holt recognized the model. It matched the one belonging to a hiker named David Miller, a young man who had gone missing 6 years prior. Using a hatchet, Holt carefully cut the backpack out of the trunk. Most of its contents were ruined, a mulchy compost of paper and cloth. But inside a side pocket, sealed in a Ziploc bag that was itself inside a hard, waterproof case, was a small, shock-resistant digital camera. The battery was long dead, but back at the station, they found the memory card was miraculously intact. Most of the photos were exactly what you'd expect. Sunsets, trail markers, a blurry selfie with a chipmunk. The final file, however, was not a photo. It was a 30-second video clip. It is filmed at night and the camera is shaking badly. David Miller is clearly terrified, breathing in ragged, choked gasps, hiding behind a large boulder. The camera is pointed at a small, moonlit clearing. What the video shows is the final answer to where the missing go. In the clearing, a dozen humanoid figures stand motionless. They are arranged in a loose circle. They are pale, their skin almost translucent in the moonlight, looking like statues of wax. And their bodies are covered in a delicate, intricate network of thin, glowing lines, like veins of light. It is a bioluminescent fungus, the same type Thorne had documented, growing on and in them. As the camera shakily zooms in, you can recognize them. There, on the left, is a woman with the same build and hiking clothes as Amelia Hayes. Near the center, a young couple stand close together, their forms unmistakably those of Ben Carter and Lily Chun. They are all there, the missing, gathered from across the years. They are not dead, but they are not alive. They are dormant, preserved, maintained. The video continues. The towering, shadowy form of the gardener glides silently into the clearing. It moves among the figures with the quiet purpose of a farmer inspecting his crops. It stops in front of the figure of Amelia Hayes. It reaches out one of its branch-like fingers and gently touches her forehead. The moment it makes contact, the fungal network on her body glows with a brilliant, blue-white light. Her head lolls back, her mouth opens in a silent "oh," and from her mouth, a thick puff of glowing spores is released. It hangs in the still night air for a moment, a beautiful, shimmering cloud, before drifting away on a slight breeze. The gardener moves to the next figure, and then the next, touching each one, and each one releasing its payload of glowing seeds into the world. David Miller's last recording reveals the second stage of the process. The gardener is not just weeding. It is farming. It transforms some intruders into grotesque art, a warning to others. But it keeps others. It preserves them, turns them into living incubators for its own propagation. They become the vessels for its expansion, human-shaped seed pods, tended to in a secret, silent nursery, waiting for the right conditions to spread the garden's influence beyond the confines of the park. We are not just the weeds to be pulled and discarded. We are the fertilizer. We are the tools in its shed. We are the seeds of our own replacement. The nature of the weeding is a cycle of terrifying transformation and of patient, horrifying cultivation. Following the recovery of Dr. Thorne's research and the chilling fragments from the Wild Pursuit team, the anomaly at designation 734 could no longer be ignored as a series of isolated tragedies. It was now understood to be a coherent, active, and intelligent phenomenon. A special access program, shielded by layers of national security classification, was established within the Department of the Interior, working with elements of the defense intelligence community. Its sole purpose was to study, contain, and if possible, neutralize the entity they internally labeled Geobiological Entity 734, or more simply, the gardener. For 5 years, this secret committee worked in absolute silence. They were the most brilliant minds in their fields: geophysicists, biochemists, strategic planners, and remote sensing experts. They had unlimited resources and the highest authority. And they failed. Completely. Their first attempts were practical, almost laughably so in hindsight. They believed they were dealing with a localized, physical entity. In late 2022, under the public guise of a firebreak installation and invasive species removal project, they sent a team of elite loggers, equipped with the most powerful chainsaws and heavy machinery, to the park's western border. Their mission was simple: to clear-cut a 2-mile-wide strip of forest, to see if the gardener would, or could, react to a direct assault on its creation. The after-action report is brief and chilling. The team entered the designated zone at 0800 hours. For 2 hours, everything was normal. Then, at 10:17 a.m., every single piece of combustion engine equipment died at the exact same moment. Chainsaws, bulldozers, transport vehicles all silent. The operators reported no sputtering, no mechanical failure, just an instantaneous cessation of function. As they stood in the sudden, profound silence, they witnessed the ground around their machinery begin to move. Thick, thorny vines, of a species none of them recognized, grew from the earth with the speed of startled snakes. They swarmed over the equipment, prying open engine blocks, forcing their way into fuel lines. The loggers reported that the vines secreted a thick, viscous sap that smelled like ozone and pine. This sap flooded the engines, gumming up pistons and corroding wires. Within 10 minutes, every machine was rendered completely inoperable, cocooned in a pulsating web of aggressive flora. The team, unarmed and terrified, retreated on foot. No one was harmed. A message had been sent. A line had been enforced. But it was the gardener's line, not theirs. The committee, sobered, moved to more drastic options. If a physical confrontation was impossible, perhaps a more elemental one would work. They modeled the effects of a massive, controlled burn. The plan was to use incendiary munitions to create a firestorm that would, in theory, sterilize the entire 400-square-mile park, destroying the gardener's physical manifestation. The climatologists and biochemists on the committee vetoed the plan almost immediately. Their models predicted a catastrophe of a different sort. The smoke from such a fire would be unlike any smoke in human history. It would be saturated with the gardener's unique, hyper-efficient pollen, its bioluminescent fungal spores, and complex organic compounds from its repurposed life forms. To burn the garden would be to aerosolize it. The models showed the fallout plume would be carried by the jet stream across the continent, and then the globe. They wouldn't be destroying the gardener. They would be spreading it. They would be the architects of a planetary pandemic, not of disease, but of transformation. It was a checkmate. Humanity's most powerful tool, our mastery of fire, was not a weapon, but the gardener's most effective possible seed dispersal mechanism. With containment options exhausted, they turned to monitoring. And what they saw on the satellite imagery was the final nail in the coffin of human agency. Dr. Thorne had theorized that the garden was managed. The satellite data proved that it was also growing. Using high-resolution spectrometry and multispectral imaging, they could map the unique biological signature of the gardener's flora. The data, cross-referenced over 5 years, was undeniable. The border of designation 734 was expanding. It was a slow, inexorable creep, no more than a few feet a year. A casual observer would never notice. But the data showed a living, breathing territory, its edges pushing outwards, converting the normal, chaotic surrounding forest into its own, orderly, silent design. It was not an invasion. It was a conversion, a process as slow, as patient, and as unstoppable as glaciation. The gardener was not in a hurry. It had all the time in the world. This brings us to our final document. It is not a report filled with data. It is a letter, a human testament to this cosmic despair. It was written in November of 2023 by Drive Evelyn Reed. Dr. Reed was, at the time, the Undersecretary of the Interior for Land and Minerals Management. She was the highest-ranking civilian with day-to-day oversight of the Verdant File. She was a woman known for her sharp intellect, her calm demeanor, and her unwavering belief in policy and process. The letter was found on her office desk, in a sealed envelope addressed simply to my successor. It was found the morning after she was reported missing. It is, in essence, a suicide note, not for a person but for a species. I will read it to you now in its entirety. To whomever sits in this chair next. If you are reading this, it means I have finally run out of euphemisms. It means I can no longer bring myself to write another reassuringly bland internal memo or sign another public lands budget that I know is utterly meaningless. I am writing this because I owe the truth to at least one other person before I go, and because I can no longer be a party to the most profound and terrifying conspiracy of silence in human history. For 5 years, I have been the custodian of the Verdant File. I have read the reports you will soon read, though they will likely be redacted even further to soften the blow. I have seen the uncorrupted footage of what happened to Mark Chin. I have listened to the full audio file from his friends, Liam Donahue and Chloe Vance. I have stared at satellite maps that show the slow, green cancer that is spreading from the heart of designation 734. And every day I have gone to meetings, smiled at senators, and upheld the lie that our national parks are safe, that the world is as it was yesterday, that we are in control. Here is the truth you will now be burdened with. Geobiological entity 734, the gardener, is not a localized anomaly. We believe it is the primary node, the heartwood, of a dormant planetary-scale intelligence. The Earth is not a rock with life on it. The Earth is a living system, and for millennia, it has been sleeping. Now, in response to a stimulus we can only guess at tour pollution, our noise, our sheer, teeming numberset is beginning to wake up. Designation 734 is not its prison. It is its beachhead. We know it is expanding. Our projections, which are classified at a level I can no longer even access, show that at its current rate of growth, it will consume the surrounding counties within 50 years, the bordering states within a century. But this linear projection is a comforting lie we tell ourselves. The real threat lies in the spores, in the pollen, in the seeds being carried by the wind and the water and the birds that are still permitted to fly over its borders. For the last 2 years, we have received authenticated reports of hypervitality and acoustic dead zones from other deep wilderness areas. The Ituri rainforest in the Congo, the Daintree in Australia, the Valdivian temperate forests of Chile. These are not new gardeners. These are seeds from the first one, taking root in fertile soil, beginning the slow process of conversion. The gardener is not conquering the world. It is blooming. We are powerless to stop it. We have run every scenario. A military strike would only aerosolize it. A biological agent would be laughably ineffective against a system that can rewrite botany on a whim. A nuclear option would crack the planet's crust and likely accelerate whatever global process is underway. We cannot fight it. We cannot contain it. We can only watch. The vanishings will continue. They will become more frequent as its territory expands. One day, it will not just be solo hikers and adventurous teenagers who are weeded. It will be logging camps. It will be rural communities. It will be suburbs. The silence will spread. The beautiful, vibrant, terrifying garden will grow. And our noisy, chaotic, wonderful civilization will be composted and turned into silver-leaf trees. We will be tended. I can no longer be the one who signs the press releases, who reassures the public while knowing that a force beyond our comprehension is slowly, patiently, turning our world into its personal arboretum. The weight of this knowledge is too heavy a burden to carry in this world, and I have developed a sudden, overwhelming desire to see a garden. My advice to you is this: do not try to fight it. You will fail. Do not tell the public. You will cause a panic that will only create more chaos for the gardener to tidy up. My advice is to do what I can no longer do. Live. Love your family. Enjoy the noisy, messy, imperfect world we have built for ourselves. The seasons are numbered. Pray for a quick winter. Sincerely, Evelyn Reed. Dr. Evelyn Reed was last seen on security footage leaving her Washington, D.C. apartment building. She got into her government vehicle and drove west. She drove for 3 days. Her car was found by a state trooper on a disused service road bordering the eastern edge of designation 734. The doors were unlocked. The keys were in the ignition. Her purse and phone were on the passenger seat. On the driver's seat, placed neatly in the center, was a single, freshly bloomed flower. Its petals were the color of spun moonlight, a shade of iridescent silver that does not exist in any botanical textbook. The trooper who found it noted in his report that he felt an overwhelming, inexplicable sense of peace when he looked at it. We exist on a thin, fragile crust of biology. We build our cities, we write our histories, we gaze at the stars, convinced of our own permanence, our own mastery. We are the children of the Enlightenment, firm in our belief that the universe is a thing to be measured, understood, and ultimately controlled. But perhaps we have been living in someone else's house all along, a house that has been quiet, dormant, and is only now beginning to stir. Perhaps our civilization, with all its art and science and noise, is nothing more than a layer of dust on an ancient piece of furniture, and the owner has finally returned to set things in order. The story of Designation 734 is not over. It is the prologue to a new chapter in the planet's history, a chapter in which we are not the authors. The gardener is not a predator. It does not hunt. It does not hate. It simply improves. It refines, cultivates, and in its world, a world of perfect, silent, verdant beauty, there is no room for the chaotic, untidy, dissonant thing that is humanity. We are the weeds in the garden of a god, and the harvest is inevitable. The protocols of the wilderness are not always about survival. Sometimes they are simply about bearing witness to the end of things. Thank you for joining us at the Wilderness Protocol. If this account has stirred something in you, we invite you to look at the world around you, to listen to its silences. The world is full of shadows, and we can only map them together for as long as we have left. Subscribe for more declassified reports and survival guides for the world that is, and the world that is to come. And remember, the next time you admire a beautiful, untouched landscape, ask yourself what it might look like when it's finished growing. Until next time, stay safe and cherish the noise.